Today we are talking about the holidays, or not, as we're saying, because this year the holidays are certainly not looking anywhere close to what they have looked like in years past. And um, the holidays, even in the best of times, create their own unique challenges, both for people with and without mental illness. But this year in particular, I think leading up to the holidays, we're all really mindful of our clients and how vulnerable they are during this time. Uh, so yeah, I mean, to say that we're in an unprecedented holiday season probably does the whole idea of what the holidays are going to look like an injustice. I think there's really no words to describe what is going on in the world right now. Um, but the holiday time, for some, and I think the expectation is that the holidays are a time of joy and celebration and gratitude and thankfulness and getting close with family members and spending time together. But for many, especially for individuals navigating treatment or struggling with mental illness, the holidays can really be a really stressful time. In the rooms of AA and NA, you often hear about the trifecta of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, and these being really high risk times of the year for these vulnerable populations. So pre-COVID, in an American Psychological Association survey, respondents have indicated that the holidays increase feelings like happiness and love and high spirits, and also increase feelings of fatigue, stress, irritability, and sadness. And some of the top stressors that people talk about around the holidays are a lack of time. There's so much going on. You're still working. You have to do your Christmas shopping. The stores are crazy busy. Kids have off school, but you still have to take care of them, navigate their schedules while taking care of your own schedule. Lack of money, especially in our society where there is such an emphasis on capitalism and financial success. And you have young people who are comparing the possessions that they have versus the possessions that their friends have, and there can just be a lot of stress around money, or lack therefore of commercialism. I think that when we look at Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and New Year's, these holidays were really, in theory, supposed to be meant to be a time of connectedness and families coming together and neighbors coming together. But the reality is that, commercialism has taken over a lot of these holidays. Pressures around gift giving. What should I get? Will they like it? Do I have to get this person a present? What if they get me a present, but I don't get them a present? These are some of the things that we hear our young adults talking about a lot, especially people in new relationships. There's always a lot of angst and anxiety about getting somebody that you're in a new relationship with something too extravagant, not extravagant enough. What should I write on my card? And then, of course, family gatherings are always listed as a top stressor, because while we may love our families in some cases, they can also be a source of stress. And for others, there's just stress, and there are a lot of ruptured relationships, and the family is a source of anxiety and stress. Now, when you look at the holidays during treatment, 64% of respondents state that with a mental illness state that the holidays make their conditions or their symptoms worse. And the challenges that are primarily reported are expectations, like this pressure to really be joyous and celebratory and go to the holiday parties and put on a smile when they don't really want to do that, and yet they feel a pressure to. Family gatherings that can be triggering and stressful. And then also a focus on drinking, food, socialization. This can be extremely triggering, especially for clients with substance use disorders and with disordered eating. For many of our clients who identify as LGBTQ, spending time at family gatherings can also present anxieties around being around families who are not affirming and being triggered in that way. During the COVID season, individuals in treatment we're finding really have some difficult choices to make when it comes to how they want to celebrate the holidays. And what we're seeing is that they basically have a couple of different choices, and no choice is the right choice, and no choice is particularly the wrong choice either, which makes the decision-making process even more stressful and difficult. The first choice is to stay home with family that you've been sheltering in place with. And this is a choice that some clients who are participating in treatment in an outpatient basis need to make. They have been in outpatient treatment. They've been sheltering in place with family because they can't be at college and their families aren't working. They're working remotely. So they've already been spending a ton of time, unplanned time together. And they need to decide whether or not they want to stay at home or escape from the home during the holidays after having been sheltered in place with family for too long. The second choice is for clients who either have not been living with family and doing outpatient treatment, or maybe they have been living at school in their own apartments, or maybe they're in an inpatient treatment setting. They have to decide whether they want to go home for the holidays. And this is a very difficult decision because if you go home, there's no true understanding if you will be able to then go back to where you were living, whether that is going back to a college campus, going back to your treatment center. And, that's largely due to the uncertainties around, a second major wave of coronavirus, or if somebody gets sick, that could interfere with plans to return to the status quo, whatever that was prior to going home for the holidays. Also, the stress of potentially going home and getting your family sick is weighing on the minds of a lot of our young adult clients. And then the third choice is to choose not to go home and to either stay on your college campus, in your own apartment, or in your inpatient treatment setting. And, for some, I think that while some feel that they don't even have a choice, like they really can't go home because clinically it's not a possibility. It's not a smart clinical option for them to take, or it's just too risky. And not being able to go home for the holidays brings with it a sense of grief and mourning in terms of not being able to celebrate the holidays in the way that you typically have in the past, and mourning that loss and feeling those feelings, and then also figuring out a way to cope ahead or to plan for those holidays so that they don't feel so upsetting and stressful while you're alone. So some of this I've spoken about before, but I want to just get into a little bit more because it relates really specifically to a lot of what we're seeing at the dorm. I'm sure WestBridge is as well with our younger population. But, when we talk about remaining at home for the holidays, like let's say that our clients are celebrating the holidays at home, many of our clients' homes are truly not affirming homes. Meaning, let's say a client struggles with a substance use disorder, and the family doesn't necessarily understand that means that, for your child's recovery, having alcohol at the Thanksgiving or the Christmas table or the Thanksgiving table or the Hanukkah table or whatever it is that you're celebrating isn't something that feels validating or affirming to what your young adult child is experiencing, especially during the holidays. And there's some families that get that and will accommodate, and there's others that just won't. And really helping prepare young adult children for the possibility that they might be triggered by their families. Another set of clients that have really verbalized a lot of concern are clients who struggle in their relationship with food. And their families are not necessarily validating or affirming of those struggles either. So for instance, we have a couple of clients whose family members make constant, food related comments that are very triggering. Like, I just ate so much, I feel like a cow, or I just ate so much, I feel like I'm going to go throw up. Or do I look like I gained 5 pounds after that, Thanksgiving dinner? Now, to some family members, these comments can seem innocuous and joking and funny, but to somebody who's struggling with their relationship with food, these types of comments are extremely triggering. And as with our substance using clients, while some families understand this and are very mindful of comments they make, others aren't, especially when we're looking at relatives like aunts, uncles, cousins who might not have as much direct knowledge of what's going on with the young adult client. So it's preparing, again, the client that they might be triggered in these ways and how to deal with that. And then finally, for our LGBTQ plus clients, as I stated earlier, going home to non-affirming homes where pronouns are not used in a way that's affirming, where questions are asked in a way that feels very invalidating. This is a source of stress, a source of anxiety, and can certainly heighten other symptoms that individuals are struggling with. The other thing that we look at for our clients who are remaining home for the holidays is boundaries. It can be so easy, especially with a young adult child, to fall into old patterns. Your 20-year-old child is very different than, your 14-year-old. Your 14-year-old might have needed help cooking and cleaning and making their bed and being reminded to, clean up their room and, all of those things that parents tend to like to do for younger children. We want our young adult our young adult clients doing these things for their own, even if they're only home for a week for the holidays, or if they've been home sheltering in place this whole time. The more that parents cross over those boundaries, the less the young adult client is owning their own responsibilities as a young adult and honing skills that they need to be successful in the real world on their own, which eventually they're going to go back to. So we've really been trying to work with families on whether your young adult child is home for 4 days or they're home indefinitely because of coronavirus. Do not do the things for them that they should be doing for themselves. It robs them of their experience of practicing and honing these skills that they need. Communication during the holidays, especially if you've been sheltering in place with family. Things like commenting on behaviors. Honey, I see that you're not eating all that food, and I thought that your coach wanted you to eat all that food. Another comment that we get is, it seems like you slept a lot. Are you feeling depressed again? Or I see you staring at the wine in the fridge there. Does that mean you're going to start drinking again? So, all these sort of styles of communication that can be quite triggering. And then finally, norms and rules, and just not everybody is going to be on the same page around norms and rules. And we have to prepare a young adult client for that reality. For clients who are returning home after not having been at home, the amount of anxiety and stress they are experiencing and sharing that they're experiencing around the possibility of bringing home the virus to their families, of getting their parents sick, of not knowing once they go home if they're going to be able to return to where they were. A disruption in the consistency and the stability that they had been experiencing up to that point in their outpatient programs or in their inpatient programs, if they're just going for a week-long, home pass, can be very disruptive. Also, asking questions about when you're home for the holidays, can you and will you be able to receive the same level of care and services at home virtually? Can you make that commitment? Can your family give you the space to make that commitment? Meaning you might not be able to do every family event or outing or whatever it is because you need to attend your DBT group because that's what you need for you. And then also separation from support networks. A lot of our clients really value the support networks that they have created vis-a-vis their treatment. And being separated from that to return home during a stressful time of year can feel very overwhelming and scary. And then we have our clients who just can't return home and they're in treatment. And for a variety of different reasons, returning home isn't really clinically appropriate. And for those clients, they really are experiencing a variety of different grief and loss reactions, and really validating that, letting them own those feelings in a very non-judgmental manner. Some of the things that they talk about is, feeling powerless, feeling like it feels really bad to not have a choice, feeling like there's no end in sight. When will I actually be able to get to see my family next? Why can't I be normal? All of my friends get to spend the holidays with their parents, but I'm stuck in treatment because I am so broken. Why can't I just be normal like my friends? And then for others, there's relief. They almost are relieved to be able to have a justified reason for not returning home because they know that home is not healthy for them right now. And it's too difficult for them to say that themselves to their family. So to be able to have a treatment team to say, this can't happen, feels like a huge relief to them. And I think we also have to recognize that positive side of things as well. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to really talk in the second half of the presentation around, how do we actually support our client populations during this time of year? What clinical interventions do we use and what are we looking at from a clinical perspective? And for this part, I'm going to turn things over to Stacy.
Thanks, Amanda. So Amanda, perfect segue because she spoke a lot about, essentially having conversations about all of these things. So really when we talk about approaching a solution, to really talk about it. And what I mean when I say talk about it, everybody talk about it. So I talk about with your clients, your participants, your family members that are going to be involved, the treatment team, really including everybody in the process. And when talking about it, anticipate the challenges. So this includes all of the challenges that Amanda had referenced and also those extra challenges of COVID. What does it look like from a quarantine perspective, either when somebody gets to their destination and when they come back, and how does that impact the plan and the intention of the trip, and then coming back to treatment if somebody goes home, for example. So in talking about it, being aware of some of what those thinking errors are, and again, this is for everyone involved, so maybe for the clients, but also for the family members, this is going to be, we often all think of our most recent experiences, and sometimes they were really good experiences, and sometimes they were not so good experiences. And so with that, when we reflect on our past holidays or maybe our times with families, that can bring up a lot of emotion. And so but also recognizing we might be in a different place today than we were then. So really just being aware of not ignoring the past per se, but how is that impacting our thinking, and are we projecting a little bit too much about what it could look like? And really, with all of these people involved, engaging others in problem solving and planning. So really looking at doing a pretty comprehensive risk benefit analysis and looking at the pros and cons of all options. So if it is a possibility and clinically appropriate, let's say for someone to leave treatment and to travel home, what are the pros and cons of doing that? And what are the pros and cons of not doing that? And really having everybody that's going to be engaged in this process or a part of this visit per se, or this holiday, to be involved in the process. And not just to point out, what are the pros and cons for the participant perhaps, but for the family as well, because they're going through this process and all have their own thoughts and feelings and emotions about all of this. So really doing a all-inclusive risk benefit analysis with everyone involved. So for those returning home, let's say someone is in treatment and the decision is they're going to go home to visit family, really reiterating and just having that conversation that going home is not a vacation. It's an opportunity, and this is true even non-holiday times, but going home for the first time or any time is an opportunity for our clients to really practice their new skills and the behaviors that support recovery. And so with that, having conversations and planning ahead of time together with family included, going back to, again, some of those things that Amanda pointed out, boundaries and how do we communicate with one another may be very different than how we once communicated together as a family. And so how do we not default back to the old ways and stay in the place of using the skills that we've all learned, family and clients included. So part of this planning together is really getting out on the table what are everyone's expectations, because our clients that are traveling home may have thoughts of not only visiting family, but visiting friends and going different places, and families' expectations and thoughts about the visit may be very, very different. And so how do we have those conversations way before the trip ever happens, and to be able to plan around what might come up, because there are going to be stressors associated with many of these things. And so how can we manage those triggering situations? First of all, talking about what they are. For those that we work with, we talk often about people, places, and things. And so there's not a one size fits all for every person or for every situation. And so is it, that a particular situation that might come up on the visit, is it something that we just need to avoid at all costs and plan to not have that as part of the plan home? Is it a matter of adjusting? Is it, going from point A to point B? Normally, we would go drive through a very triggering neighborhood, but we're going to plan ahead and we're going to adjust the route so we don't, we're still able to do that part of the trip, but we're going to adjust so it's less triggering. Or is it a matter of support? Is it a matter of a part of the trip that could be triggering, but there's just a little bit extra support, and maybe that's clinical support from the team virtually, or maybe it's looking for a family member to provide some support in this situation that could be triggering. And talking about managing access to others, medication, money, vehicles, unrestricted internet, gaming, all things that sometimes come up when someone goes home. And again, the solution is not a one size fits all. So there may be certain things that we talk about removing, other family members' medications that could be triggering to have in the home. Maybe we need to remove or secure them. Maybe we can't remove them because they're legitimately a prescription that dad needs, but we need to secure them and not have them in eyes view because the participant identifies that that might be triggering for them. Maybe when it comes to internet and gaming, if they haven't been doing that at all in treatment, it would be very easy to go full force and do internet and gaming all night. But remembering that, this isn't a vacation from recovery, and still implementing some of the structure that has been helpful to recovery. So it may be a matter in this case of limiting access as opposed to completely removing. So some specific tools for returning home. Tools are helpful in creating a sense of structure, consistency, and meaningful communication. And structure and consistency, especially in early recovery, are very, very important. So we would always encourage a written plan, again, for the holiday or for any trip. What is, and a written plan, not just a discussion, but a written plan that we all agree on and it's on paper. And it provides the family and the participant or client with a set of expectations, a sense of safety, and increased potential for a positive experience. So in this plan, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but things like transportation and logistics. And again, are there going to be extra supports that are needed for those things? Much more complicated with COVID. It would be non-COVID times. We might offer support in traveling, because going from point A to point B and being in the airport and doing all these, navigating all these situations alone might be better done with a sober coach or support. That could be a challenge right now. But so not leaving anything out, starting from the beginning of the trip and how we're getting there. What are the planned activities and considerations for these activities? So again, going back to, is there a different level of support? Are there activities that are being planned for that maybe are not the best for this particular trip for a number of reasons? Maybe they are going to be too stressful or too triggering. And so do we need to kind of take those considerations in and modify the plan before one gets home? Plan should definitely include the basics. So things like hygiene, nutrition, exercise, sleep, all those things that we're working with our participants on in terms of staying well, getting well, staying well, those should all be included, and recognizing that that's always a challenge when you change the environment to continue to implement, but that they're really important. And so how can we work with our participants, our clients, to have that plan and stick with it, so it's not also situation where parents are kind of dictating, oh, don't forget, you need to exercise. Aren't you supposed to be getting ready for bed right now? And maybe that support is needed. And if so, then again, it's talked about way ahead of time. And it's part of the plan as opposed to defaulting to old behaviors and patterns. And so this plan should also incorporate what are the coping strategies and stress relievers. So maybe it is having time alone. Maybe it's connecting with one's clinical team and incorporating that into the schedule so it's planned for. And then planning for a change in plan, because always something comes up and the plan may be prompted to change, and it might be from the client or participant who's going home. It might be the family member, and those situations can be hard because, again, if we haven't had a thoughtful, mindful, planned conversation about how a certain activity may go and how to support it, then it could be really difficult. It could be a situation where our participant or client is maybe making an impulsive decision about something. And so how do we make a plan ahead of time for what if a change of plan comes up? And so maybe our standard becomes, well, a change in plan isn't unreasonable, but it can't be in the same day. So we need to hit pause and talk about it, today, to propose a change in plan for tomorrow and include the treatment team in that, just as an example. So additional tools, again, applicable to treatment in general, but definitely helpful when we're talking about visits home, and particularly for visits home for the holiday. RAP plan, so Wellness, Recovery, and Action Plan. I'm sure many people are familiar with that, developed by Mary Ellen Copeland. It's a self-determined management tool, and it's shared ahead of time with support. So these are just some of the aspects of a RAP plan, and some of our participants typically have them in general, just as part of recovery, but sometimes we'll work with people to modify and kind of make up a mini RAP plan specific to a trip home per se, such as for the holidays. And so what's in that? So what's in my wellness toolbox? For me, it might be journaling or meditation. What's my daily maintenance look like? For me, it means I need to get 8 hours of sleep. I have to have breakfast. I have to go to a meeting. What is it, the things that help me to stay well? What are the early warning signs of when I'm not doing well? And what does that look like for me? What does crisis planning look like? If there start to be a lot of early warning signs, how do we manage that crisis? What's my responsibility? What's family's responsibility? Who's involved? And then post-crisis planning, because even with the best, laid out plans, there can be something that can come up, and having a plan to have not only how to manage the crisis, but then how to kind of regroup after the crisis, knowing that the treatment team may be miles and miles away. How are we all going to do that? And so not only having our clients and participants develop these plans, but really sharing them as much as they're comfortable with their family that they're going to be around for the visit. A comfort agreement is a tool that we often use specific for our family work with participants and and their families, but again, it can be modified and used for specific situations. Maybe it's for the whole trip and the time at home. Maybe it's for that one particular Christmas dinner because there's going to be a lot of people and it might be extra stressful. But essentially, it's an opportunity for everybody that's going to be involved to really set a guideline for what it's going to look like so everybody feels respected and supported. So it may be for, things like communication on there using I statements. It may be certain topics that are really not a good idea to talk about without the support of the clinical team. And so we need to identify what are the good, what are the common dinner table topics that we're all agreeable to talking about. Things like taking breaks. What does it look like, or when do I know that I need to take a break and that taking a break is okay? And most important, if I need to take a break, what does that reconnection look like afterwards? And Amanda mentioned this before, virtual services with the clinical team. I mean, we've all gotten quite creative with how to do virtual services. And so having those conversations around what are the possibilities when someone goes home, how are we going to stay in touch, what's going to be the planned connection, and then what's going to be the availability for the unplanned connection if needed. So for those not returning home, equally important to plan ahead. It's not a situation where it's okay, not going home, still in treatment, just business as usual. It's difficult, and we're all experiencing this. Those of us that might typically travel for holidays and are not, it's difficult, and it prompts us to think about, okay, well, now what? Now what are we going to do? So equally important to proactively plan, and including all parties again in this: the individual that's in treatment, the family, the clinical team. And so managing those feelings associated with not returning home, depending on someone's feeling, whether they're feeling really sad and experiencing a lot of grief around not going home, or feeling that sense of relief of, oh my gosh, I knew it was going to be stressful and I wasn't ready. I'm so glad I'm not going home, no matter what it is. I think having that opportunity to, again, create a platform with our clients to really normalize. If they're not going home because of COVID, again, unprecedented times, we're all in this boat together, and you're not alone. And so with that, looking at acceptance. So how do we accept the situation? And then, because again, it's not just a matter of accepting and saying, okay, I'm not going home, but how can we look at, what's next? What can we do? We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but power of peer support here. So how can we work with our participants and clients together to get support from one another when they're in a similar boat? And same thing with families. If it's a situation where we have kind of family to family dialogue, a lot of families are going through this and experiencing a lot of difficult feelings that they could certainly benefit from processing with other families. And it's really important to assess for risk. Again, this is under not going home, but really this is the case for this time of year anyways, kind of the trifecta as Amanda referred to earlier. And really looking at any change and assessment for risk. So that could be for all of our clients very different. For some, it might be increased risk for isolation, impulsivity, substance use, suicide, self-harm. So really being aware of what that looks like and assessing, leading up to the holidays and throughout. And so again, here's that and next. So redefining or creating a new normal. When the pandemic first started, I used to hate that a new normal, because I think I was fighting it and not accepting it, but it really is. And we've had to all, I think, in many different ways and in our treatment facilities, look at how can we do things differently? How can we try to provide services uninterrupted and still keep everyone as safe as possible? So what can the virtual world offer us? And again, working with our participants and families to really identify, well, what are going to be the biggest pieces that you are looking forward to that we still want to try to recreate? And for a lot of people, it's just that sense of togetherness. So whether it's, cooking on one's own and eating while we're all on camera, it may sound weird or foreign, but for some people, there's still that sense of connection, and we've all gotten pretty used to it, I think. It could be opening gifts. Maybe there's still a gift exchange, but we're doing it virtually when we're on Zoom or whatever form together and socializing with one another. And then thinking about what are some new traditions. There's an incredible amount of stuff online that you can find in terms of different ideas with games, a scavenger hunt, a gratitude activity, but really encouraging our participants and families to get creative and think of different ways that we can either create new traditions or still embrace some of what we were anticipating should we have gone home. and still keeping those conversations, if there is going to be virtual components around, what does that look like? What are the expectations? Because it still may be equally as triggering to have family or someone on the other end of the computer that's drinking alcohol with their dinner. And some families, again, may get that, and they may think, okay, yes, it's virtual, but we're still together, and therefore I'm not going to have alcohol. And some may not. Some may say, well, it's different. They're not sitting right beside me. So really just prompting and facilitating those conversations ahead of time so everybody can be prepared for what that looks like in terms of all of these things. And similarly, timeframes, taking breaks. We all know at this point it's hard to be on computer for hours on end. So being realistic about what that looks like when we are being creative. So some additional resources, again, this is not a full list, but that's a good start. Just thinking about, for the holidays, stress, going home or not going home, what are the resources available in addition to the clinical team? So many of us are using these with our clients right now, but AA and NA, what's the online meetings, there's always one available, and again, finding if someone's going home, finding ahead of time maybe some that are going to be helpful and plugging them into the schedule. Smart Recovery, Al-Anon, again, more in regards to AA. Recovery Dharma incorporates some Buddhist principles, so that might be helpful for some. And then NAMI is a huge resource, so NAMI Connection specifically for those that experience mental health and want to connect in a peer-to-peer forum, and then they also have an abundance of family support groups as well. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, again, a great resource, and having those conversations with the clinical team too in terms of crisis support, and if someone goes home in particular, then is the team going to be available in some capacity, or do we need to provide additional hotlines and resources? Hearing Voices Network has a great part of their website dedicated to surviving COVID-19 for those that experience or identify with hearing voices or visions, which may be enhanced during this time of isolation that a lot of people are inside. And so there's a lot of great resources on there. And the CDC, many of us are referring to the CDC for things around travel, but they also have some specific resources for stress and mental health. So again, this is not a fully comprehensive list, but just again with the idea of wanting to put some resources out there. So with that, I'd love to turn it back over to Sarah to facilitate some discussions and questions.
Thank you, Stacy, and to Amanda. It's been a really, really rich discussion. I even, as you were talking, Stacy, I was thinking about some tips that I was going to integrate into some of our work that we're doing at the dorm. A lot of what we do is very similar, but it's always nice to hear some of the language that other folks use around these kind of plans to make sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to going home or not for any holiday or any visit home. I think about how much fantasy there is around holidays in particular, and even thinking about the fantasy that we were kind of taught when we were kids about any, mythical creatures that were around or other kinds of holiday traditions. And that really lives on in our thinking about how to celebrate the holidays with our families now, and then the fantasy of what it will be like when we're with our family, or all the things that we hope will come true when we go home to visit. So that's a really crucial component of this conversation. So I really appreciate all the commentary on that. So we didn't have any questions that came through in the chat, but I'm sure that there are folks that have thoughts or observations or questions for either Stacy or Amanda that have been percolating throughout. So you're welcome to put them in the chat, or if you'd like to turn on your microphone, I'm happy to have you just ask any questions you might have. In addition to questions, we're also happy to have folks share any wisdom because we have our experiences to speak from, but this is a collaborative space where we can, if anybody has any awesome ideas, this is a great place to share them too.
feel like I want to just mention
go ahead.
This this particular subject was near and dear to my heart because, as a lot of you know, this isn't only what I do as a living. I've lived through this as a parent, and we have had so many holidays over probably the span of 5 or 6 years where at least one of my children hasn't been home because they've been in treatment, and or they have come home just for the holiday. And so as a parent, I don't know if we have any parents that have joined us today that are parents and not part of the professional space, but I just want to make a comment that we're really glad you're here. If there are parents that have joined us today, I did get a couple of emails that they might join. I do recognize how difficult this time can be during the holidays and navigating all these things that we've talked about today, and the holding boundaries and the, I've done it myself as a parent, and I also appreciate so much the guidance that Amanda and Stacy have shared with us today, because I've been on the other end of that advice and I've learned so much over the years. So anyway, just wanted to share my support for any parents that might be joining us today and going through this exact same thing that I've been through. I just really appreciate everybody's effort in doing this today.
Thanks, Tracy. And I know you're not alone, and even folks who are like you have dual identities of working in the field and also happen to be parents. Even if their kids aren't in treatment, it can be a complicated time for young adulthood or emerging adulthood anyway, because of course family systems change, parents might separate, or partners might join into holidays, new children arrive, other loved ones can join in, family systems change all the time. And that is a really active conversation that needs to be had among families when those dynamics are changing. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'll read Jerry's question, which is we've actually, one of the blessings of COVID for the dorm was that we started some additional programming. And one of the things that we started was a parent collective, which is every other week opportunity for parents in all of our locations to come together and support each other and get some guidance from the team. And we're actually talking about this in our next parent collective next Tuesday, because it is so active in this time of year. And it's really about having the conversation lots of different times, with parents only, in groups, with the whole family together, with the young adult. So as many times we can have this conversation, the better. So Jerry, you mentioned structuring conversations with participants or clients about the reality of how relationships evolve over time. And that's a big factor when it comes to holidays. And I agree with you. And that's actually what made me think about the changes that happen in family dynamics anyway, because as people age, the family changes, with different membership or different ways of being. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that before we turn it over to Stacy or Amanda?
Well, I was just thinking about, within my own family, how things have truly evolved. I come from what were two fairly large extended families. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of involvement with both extended families, especially during the holidays. And, now that's all changed. Children grow up, they have children of their own. You don't see each other as often. You lose touch with cousins. And I think that there's a big, I think there's a lot of the expectations, especially if you grew up in that kind of environment around the holidays, you really have to adapt.
Down the bottom somewhere.
Sorry.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I'm relating because similar to my family. Amanda, do you have anything to talk about, mention about that, about how we handle that at the dorm?
I mean, I think that just listening to everybody's comments and what they're talking about right now, I think the important thing to remember is that there's no right or wrong way to do the holidays right now. And if we can move away from thinking in those types of terms and more in terms of thinking about what's right or wrong, or what feels the most right and the most wrong for me at this particular moment in time. Because what's right or wrong for me might not be the same for Sarah or Jerry or Stacy or Tracy. We all have our unique needs during this time. And even within a family system, like you might, for instance, be really uncomfortable getting together with extended family right now, but you might have extended family who are inviting, the whole crew over for a Thanksgiving dinner. And how do you assert that you're not comfortable with that in a way that doesn't, in a way that they can hear? And helping people to navigate that, because at the end of the day, we all have to do what we're most comfortable with. Our clients have to do what is the most comfortable for them and what is in their best clinical interests. Because that's really all we can do right now. It just is. And there's no one right or wrong way. And also remembering that, and we've said this in terms of so many different things, that just because we are distanced from people during this time doesn't need to mean that we are alone, lonely, or isolated, because we can have digital celebrations, and we can digitally connect to our treatment and our support networks. It's going to look different, it's going to feel different, but that doesn't mean that we can't still feel a sense of connection. And that's important for everybody to remember.
Thank you. And I think about, Judy mentioned that that this is going to be a different kind of holiday season or Christmas that we've never seen before, because we're winging it with COVID. But what I like to think about is every time there's an opportunity for something different, this isn't going to be the same year that it's always been. So it actually offers a nice opportunity to reset how the family can engage around holidays, because it's going to be reset anyway. So instead of the client or identified patient being the one who's needing people to change, it can be the whole family needs to change what they're going to be doing because of COVID. So then it doesn't feel as potentially awkward or I kind of putting somebody out there about how they're the ones that's causing the whole family to do something different this year. It's just one factor in a really complicated year. The other thing I was thinking about too is just that also kind of thinking about the parent fantasy. We talk a lot about the identified client having a fantasy or belief about what the visit home will be like. But of course, the parents have a lot of thoughts and feelings about what they're hoping the visit home will be like too.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I don't know how to do the chat.
That's okay. Yeah, and I saw you turned off your microphone. So anyway. Great timing. Mm-hmm.
My son said there is a place in Manchester that if families come up there, they can get immediate COVID testing, and then if they're, what do you call it, clean, then they can visit their loved one. Is that true or is that false? Do you know?
Stacy, that's for you.
Yeah, I hate to say I don't know, but I don't know because I think it's very possible, and things are changing every day. I mean, even when we have participants that come to us for admission, we have a process around quarantine and testing, and we've had, even within the same week, someone go for a COVID test and it takes 2 days for them to get it back, and we've gone to the same place thinking, oh, it's a quick turnaround, and it's been 4 or 5 days. So that's not to say that there isn't. It's not on my radar yet. But I think that would be great if that is something that is available, particularly, to allow, if there's going to be travel, for it to be as safe as possible.
Thank you.
On that note, we have just another couple of minutes left. If there's any other questions or words of wisdom that people want to share, go ahead. Judy, were you going to say something, or are you saying goodbye? Because I saw your note. So bye, Judy. Thanks for being here. I know folks are often heading off to a few minutes of break between one Zoom meeting and another. So as we come close to the 4 o'clock hour, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and pass it back to Tracy to close us up.
Again, thank you all for choosing to spend this hour with us. We really appreciate you spending this time with us, and it's always a great discussion. So we appreciate your voice at the table. Next week, please consider joining us as we join with Gould Farm. And our topic is going to be, it's a really good one. Hold on just a second. It is, I just lost it. In pursuit of work and purpose. And I am very excited about the discussion around finding work and purpose, especially during this age of COVID. And this year, 2020, really hasn't slowed us down either at the dorm or at Gould Farm. And we're going to be talking about how we've managed to continue that pursuit in the year of 2020. So I hope you guys will all join us. And you have 6 minutes to get ready for your next appointment. So be well, friends, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Stacy, so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're
Take
very
care.
welcome. It was a great experience.
Yeah, we really appreciated your work on this, and